redesigned every Johto Pokemon Gym Leader with a brand new typing, brand new lore, and a brand new regional form for their signature Pokemon. And stay tuned because I'm actually really proud of some of the later ones. Because while the original Pokemon Gold and Silver games are iconic, no one can deny that, I've never really thought it's because of their characters and gym leaders. See, their neighbors in the Kanto region are full of iconic boss fights. Lieutenant Surge, Sabrina, Giovanni, all of them have interesting characters, designs, and lore that really make them memorable. But when the topic of Johto Pokemon Gym Leaders comes up, it's always the same thing.
Yeah, Whitney's Miltank is, it's tough, I hate that cow.
Surely one of the most iconic and beloved Pokemon regions should be known for more than one juiced up bovine. But that's not my only issue with the Johto gyms, and not the only reason I decided to make so many of their designs much cooler. Many of the Johto gym leaders don't even use Pokemon from Johto. It also feels like the developers were trying to use all of the Pokemon typings that weren't used in the Kanto region. And that's fine on paper, but it really causes a disconnect between the character's lore and the town they live in. For example, Jasmine takes care of a lighthouse by the watery ocean in which she cares for an Ampharos, an electric type Pokemon, so naturally, she's a steel type trainer. Why? They also included the first dragon type gym leader only to make her an immature brat who, once you beat her, cries and refuses to admit defeat. The second time this happens in the region! What the hell? Clair deserves to be way more badass than that. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. In my redesigns, I put a huge focus on making sure that the character's lore fits with the town around them, as well as their new typing and team. And I said this earlier, but I really am proud of some of these, so let me know which one was your favorite down below. Also, big shout out to friend of the channel, Fayahato, who is the artist who brought all of my ideas to life. Couldn't have done this without them. But let's go ahead and go through our brand new Johto gym leaders, starting with number 1, Falkner. Falkner, I think, is the embodiment of almost every problem I have with the Johto gym leaders. To start out with, he lives in Violet City, whose most notable location is the Bellsprout Tower, a massive swaying structure in the middle of town filled with an order of monks who focus on training grass-type Pokemon just like their name suggests. So naturally, Falkner trains flying types. And of his flying type Pokemon, he has a Pidgey and an under-leveled Pidgeotto that shouldn't have evolved yet. Now, ignoring the fact that it's completely lame just to have 2 Pokemon in the same family tree, those are both Kanto Pokemon, and it completely ignores all of the pretty cool flying types the Johto Pokedex has. Give him a Hoppip! Natu! Gligar! Why give him the most basic bird that's not even from this region? There are so many cooler options you could have given him, but no! His Pidgey doesn't even have a flying type move! It has Tackle and Sand Attack! What were the devs even thinking? So to make Falkner more in tune with Violet City, we're naturally making him a grass-type trainer. In this redesign, despite being very young, Falkner has become the head monk of his sect thanks to his Pokemon battle prowess. Being a very young and sometimes immature leader, he challenges a lot of the outdated traditions that many of the other monks practice. One of the major overarching themes of Johto is culture and tradition. Whether we're talking about the legends of the mythological beasts in the region, the Kimono girls, or the massive shrines and structures that populate the region, it's all over. So I thought it would be really cool if one of the first gym leaders you fight in Johto challenged those traditions. He's trying to keep the best part of the monk practices while still trying to bring it into the modern age. As you can see in his design, where he has much more vibrant robes compared to the rest of the monks in Bellsprout Tower. For Falkner's team, we're gonna keep him to 2 Pokemon, but instead of a basic ass Pidgey, we're gonna give him a Sunflora, a much more iconic grass type Pokemon from Johto, but still not one that's super strong. For Falkner's signature Pidgeotto though, I had a much bigger challenge redesigning it to be a grass type, especially since I really wanted to incorporate Bellsprout into the design somehow. So I took inspiration from some other Pokemon, mainly Torterra as well as Mantine and Remoraid. This Pidgeotto is a grass and flying type Pokemon whose wings develop such rich nutrients that Bellsprouts are able to sustain themselves by rooting into them. This creates a symbiotic relationship where Bellsprout is light enough that Pidgeotto is still able to take flight, and in return, Bellsprouts will use bullet seeds to shoot down its prey and help Pidgeotto hunt. It basically turns the bird Pokemon into a seed-powered fighter jet. And with the ability Skill Link allowing Bullet Seed to hit 5 times every time, it's a straight up menace. And speaking of menaces, I want to talk about today's sponsor, Mantis Sleep. Because one of the biggest enemies that I fight in life is exhaustion. If I don't get a good night's rest, I often feel super lethargic and tired the next day, and I really don't have the ability to focus on anything, much less making videos. It also doesn't help that I'm looking at screens all day and I live next to a really busy street with cars driving by with their headlights going through my windows. If I want any hope of getting some quality rest, a sleep mask is a must. But the issue is that a lot of sleep masks just don't fit right. They're either super uncomfortable, itchy, they don't fit my watermelon-sized head, or in worst cases, they just straight up irritate my eyes. Luckily enough, recently Mantis Sleep reached out to me and they were kind enough to send me 2 of their quality sleep masks, the Mantis Sleep Pro and the Mantis Sleep Silk. And I know that this is a sponsored ad read, but I genuinely want to tell you that every night since they sent me this sleep mask, I have used it. I've even traveled with it. I love it so much, and it has made such a genuine improvement in my quality of life. Not only are their sleep masks super adjustable with pro nap movement and these little eye cups to make it so that they don't put pressure on your eyelids, but they're super comfortable and they don't come off my head at night, so I wake up feeling well rested. I can't thank Mantis Sleep enough for sponsoring this video and allowing me to pay the artist that helped me create all these gym leader designs. If you're finding that you have trouble sleeping, I highly recommend you check out Mantis Sleep using the link in the description. And hey, you can even use code Moopsten for 10% off your order. But without further ado, let's talk about some creepy crawly Pokemon. And that brings us to gym leader number 2, Bugsy. Now, despite Bugsy's name, we are turning him into a psychic type trainer, and there's a good reason for this. A lot of the issues I have with Falkner, I also have with Bugsy. Most notably, he passes over a lot of the cool bug types in the Johto region like Lediva and Ledian to instead use Kakuna and Metapod, which no one was really asking for a gym leader that uses those. The reason I decided to make Bugsy a psychic type trainer though is because in his hometown of Azalea, there's the iconic Slowpoke well. I didn't want to make Bugsy a water type trainer since Misty kind of has a lock on the whole second gym water type thing. I also think using Slowpoke's secondary typing of psychic is much more on theme for the lore that I'm going for. In this universe, Bugsy comes from a family of samurai who have been tasked with guarding the sacred Pokemon of Slowpoke for hundreds of years, which once again fits in with Johto's themes of tradition and culture. This also allowed me to make Bugsy a blind samurai, which is just kick-ass design-wise. Like, we all love blind warriors. It's one of the coolest tropes in media. Another gripe a lot of people have with the Johto gym leaders is they don't really do much in the story, so in this universe, Bugsy will actually fight alongside the player in double battles when they're fighting Team Rocket and the Slowpoke well. For Bugsy's team of psychic types, we didn't want to make it too powerful since it's still the second gym, so we're gonna give him a Natu, a Slowking, which is on theme, and his iconic Scyther. To match Bugsy, I made this Scyther a psychic and steel type warrior. In Bugsy's family of samurai, children are given Scythers when they're very young so that they can train their entire lives beside each other and learn to fight together. While he was very young though, Bugsy had an accident in which he was blinded. This is why we don't give children swords. But so they could better understand their trainer, Scyther also made the vow to blind himself. Also, instead of 2 bladed wings, this Scyther now has both a katana and a shield so that they could both attack and defend all of their master's needs and whims. This is also a pretty common theme among psychic type Pokemon like Gardevoir, or so I've heard! I mean, I wouldn't know anything about that. Let's move on and talk about something actually sinister. Whitney. Now, I talked about this earlier, but despite being a very young girl, Whitney is commonly referred to as the most evil, vile, cruel gym leader ever. Which is saying something considering Giovanni was the leader of a massive criminal organization literally in the game before this one. This is namely because not only is Whitney's Miltank a straight up beast when it uses rollout, but after you beat her, she'll straight up cry and refuse to give you your gym badge until one of her employees reminds her she has to. This is why you don't hire children. I'm looking at you, Geeta. To match the evil in Whitney's heart, and for the record, I'm not being mean, I think all children are evil, we're making Whitney a punk rock dark type trainer. Because it's downright disrespectful that there wasn't a dark type gym leader until Piers in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Like, that's insane, right? This is the generation that dark types were introduced, but we didn't get a gym leader for like 15-20 years. So now Whitney is a straight up hooligan, a delinquent, a girl who runs the largest gang of children in Goldenrod City. Sort of. In actuality, she's a child, she's a middle schooler, she's just going through her edgy phase. Yes, maybe she's acting out, worshipping Giratina, and dressing in crazy outfits it's because a boy in her class called her basic once. But is she really doing any harm or breaking any laws? Not really. And most importantly, will she look back on this phase in 10 years and cringe keeping her up at night until 2 in the morning? Almost definitely. But she's in middle school and being cringe is a rite of passage. For her team though, her first Pokemon is gonna be an Umbreon. It used to be her cute little Eevee until Whitney decided that she had become a Herald of Darkness. A Houndoom, which is the perfect Pokemon for someone who claims to be a Giratina worshipper, but secretly just likes cute dogs. And of course, her demonic Miltank, a vile, disgusting creature straight from hell itself, whose horns have turned demonic, chains binding it to make sure it doesn't release its full evil potential, and blood oozing out of its udders. What? I'm being nice to Whitney because she's a literal child, but this Miltank should know better! It knows what it did! It knows the Pokemon it's taken from me. But speaking of lost, let's move on to Morty, who uses Ghost-type Pokemon. Now, Morty as a gym leader really confuses me, because there are some parts of him that I love. I think that his character design is the best among the Johto gym leaders. It's clean, it's memorable, it has a great silhouette, and his Pokemon typing of Ghost fits thematically with a mythological town whose main monument burned to the ground. Not to mention, he actually does stuff outside of just sitting in his gym. He'll actually investigate the ruins of the burnt tower in hopes of seeing Ho-Oh. It sounds great, but in practice it leaves a lot to be desired, because even once the player catches Ho-Oh, Morty doesn't really have anything else to do, and he doesn't even have unique dialogue upon you catching it. His team also doesn't use the one ghost Pokemon that was introduced in the Johto region, Misdrevious, and instead uses the entire Ghastly line. He has 2 Haunters, you couldn't fit one Misdrevious into that? So instead of giving Morty a complete revamp, I more just want to improve on the foundation that's already there. As a character, Morty is still fascinated by the tragedy that hit Ukritique City all those years ago and the burning of Brass Tower. But in this universe, he dedicated himself to trading water Pokemon and making sure that no tragedy like that will ever hit his town again, which is why his new redesign strongly resembles a firefighter. He still wants to investigate the legendary beast and meet Ho-Oh, but now instead of being for very vague reasons, it's so that he can figure out the mystery of what happened all those years ago and prevent any other Pokemon from losing their lives due to fire. For Morty's team of Pokemon, we're going with a bunch of classic Johto water types, but all of which have roles in stopping fires. He has a Quagsire, which helps contain fires using both water and mud, a Mantine, a flying water-type Pokemon that can get an aerial view to spot victims, and an Octillery, which can use precise pressurized water to put out fire in hard-to-reach places. A much more diverse group of Pokemon than a Ghastly, 2 Haunters, and a Gengar. But speaking of Gengar, this regional form is probably my second favorite redesign from this batch, my first of which is Clair, but that'll come later. One of my least favorite parts about Gengar's actual design is that he has feet, which I really think takes away from the wispy and ghostly nature that both Haunter and Ghastly have. So while I kept his little nubby feet in, I wanted to go full on gaseous form. So now this water and flying type Gengar is a straight up rain cloud, very reminiscent of the rain cloud that put out the fires of Brass Tower over a millennia ago in the same town. Look at him, he's so whimsical and bratty, I adore him. But following up on one of my favorite redesigns and favorite gym leaders, we have arguably the most forgettable gym leader in the whole region, Chuck. Now, let's play a game. I want you, the viewer, to think of one character trait of Chuck that has nothing to do with him training fighting type Pokemon. If you answered anything, congratulations, you know more about Chuck than his wife, who, according to in-game lore, he actively neglects. That's like the one thing we know about him, is he's a bad husband. Why is Johto like this? I'm just saying, in Kanto we have the guy who fought in the Pokemon War and whose electric Pokemon saved him, and in Johto we have the guy who doesn't pay attention to his wife. She even complains to the player that he spends time training his Pokemon 24/7, which is insane because he's the 5th gym leader and he only has 2 Pokemon. What is he doing with all of this time? So we're gonna give Chuck a better work-life balance. In this universe, he's a devoted husband who loves his wife. And you know what? In this universe, he also has kids. They have children together. He's a loving father. He's a family man. Since home is where the hearth is, this version of Chuck is now a fire type trainer. which is reflected in his warm and nurturing personality. Along with the help of his family, Chuck actually runs a Pokemon daycare which we've relocated to his home in Cyanwood City. For Chuck's team though, I took a lot of creative liberties, since let's be honest, his original team is one of the biggest pushovers in the entire series. Not to mention the fire type selection in Johto is really bad. I didn't want to use Entei or Typhlosion, which basically left me with Houndoom, who I already gave to Whitney, and Magmy. At first, I thought I needed to change my concept for what Chuck was going to be, but then I realized for a person running a daycare, Magby is the perfect Pokemon. Not only were baby Pokemon introduced in this region, so it would be nice if one of the gym leaders had one, but Magby having Flame Body makes sense for a daycare owner since Pokemon with that ability help eggs to hatch faster. But since we want to actually fill out Chuck's team a bit more, in addition to Magby, we're going to give their whole family line to Chuck, so he also has a Magmar and a Magmortar. Yes, I know they're from generations 1 and 4, but work with me here! I think it just fits too well with the theme not to use them. For Chuck's signature Pokemon, Poliwrath, we really juice them the hell up to make them a fire fighting type, because we can never have too many of those, right? I've also replaced the swirling pattern on Poliwrath's stomach, which, fun fact, is their intestines, with a sun pattern, because ooh, they're a bright shining star. Also, let's be honest, no one looked at the original design for Poliwrath and knew they were a fighting type. Look at these skinny little arms, they can't punch anything. Moving on to gym leader number 6, we have Jasmine, who is probably the most notable gym leader from this region, and I talked about this earlier, but it's absolute bullshit that she's not an electric type trainer. Like, I can't be the only guy who was confused when I was playing Gen 2 for the first time and she didn't have Ampharos on her team. We went on a whole side quest to get this thing medicine, only for it to never actually take part in battles. And like, yeah, she's a steel type trainer, but 2 out of the 3 Pokemon on her team are also electric type. She has 2 Magnemites. It would have been so easy to make her an electric type trainer Pokemon. Why? And fun fact, Jasmine is also found as an NPC in the other notable lighthouse city, Sunny Shore in Sinnoh, which is run by the gym leader Falkner, an electric type trainer. Why is the Johto region like this? In our redesign, Jasmine is still the caretaker of the lighthouse, but she's much more active in this role. Her design also much more reflects her typing than the old one did. This doesn't scream steel, but if I talk about it anymore, my blood pressure is gonna go through the roof. Her new jacket is made of a reflective material so that when lights shine on it, they reflect, making her very easy to spot, cause lighthouse, right? The different lights on her costume also shine brightly and add a bit more razzle-dazzle when Jasmine takes part in Pokemon contests, which she canonically does several times in the games. For her Pokemon, obviously we're adding Ampharos to her team. It was a crime that it wasn't there in the first place, but we're also adding a Flaffy, who is the next lighthouse Pokemon in training. So the next time Ampharos gets a cold, Flaffy will step up and do its job for them. Jasmine will also have a lantern since she lives by the ocean. This Pokemon is particularly useful because on foggy days when the lighthouse is hard to see, Jasmine and Lantern will surf out to sea and personally guide ships to safety. And that leaves us with Jasmine's final and signature Pokemon, Steelix. For this redesign, I took a lot of inspiration from Plasma Balls. You know, those little grass orbs you see at science museums that when you touch, the lightning goes to your finger and you feel like a wizard? That's essentially what we turned Steelix's head into, and instead of looking like a string of anal beads, we made Steelix's main body a bunch of cords with frayed ends. Much more on theme for a pure electric type Pokemon. Now before we move on to the Dragon Tamer Clair, we have another one of the most forgettable gym leaders in all of existence, Pryce. And Pryce is the poster boy for another one of the big issues I have with Johto gym leaders that I mentioned with Bugsy, in the fact that they don't really do shit. Which, to be fair, is not a problem unique to the Johto region, but it's especially on display with Pryce because he screams missed potential. Because I'm sorry, Pryce, you're one of the most powerful trainers in the Johto region, right? So why is it that when Team Rocket takes control of your hometown and there is a bright red Gyarados rampaging in the Lake of Rage, that you don't do anything and you just sit in your gym? Not to mention, outside of being old, Pryce doesn't really have any notable character traits. Like, at least Chuck is a bad husband. Pryce is just old. He's just a guy. Did you know that Pryce's home of Mahogany Town has the subtitle, Home of the Ninja? Isn't that cool? Do you know what Pryce has to do with that? Absolutely jack all! He would legitimately call Naruto Boruto's dad. That's how clueless and boring he is. So in my redesign, Pryce is a straight up ninja master. But more than that, we're also making him Koga's father and Janine's grandfather, the two ninja poison masters of Fuchsia City. Cause like, it's crazy that the two actual ninjas in the Pokemon universe don't have anything to do with the city called Home of the Ninja. Why is the Johto region like this? Not only does making Pryce their relative create a cool connection between Johto and Kanto, but once again it ties into that Johto theme of tradition and culture. Just like his child and grandchild, Pryce is now a poison Pokemon master. Alongside his venomous Pokemon team of Ariados, Gligar, and Crobat, Pryce will actually help the player and Lance take down Team Rocket since he's been monitoring their activity for weeks, waiting for the perfect time to take them out. His ace Pokemon, Mamoswine, which we evolved from as Piloswine previously, is a poison and steel type armory of ninja tool, who on Pryce's command will not only charge into a legion of enemies, but also provide the perfect weapon Pryce needs for any situation. Think of them as the Pokemon equivalent to Batman's utility belt. And thanks to the poisonous quills on his back, Mamoswine doesn't even have any obvious weak points. But that all brings me to our final, and my favorite, redesign of the evening, Clair. Just like her cousin, Lance, who at the time of the games is the Pokemon champion of the Johto and Kanto region. Both of these characters are descendants from a long line of Pokemon Dragon-type trainers, because once again, Johto is all about tradition and family and culture. You know the deal by now. Unlike Lance, who is very stoic and down to earth, Clair is a bit more immature. She's a bit of a spoiled sore loser who has never actually been able to beat her cousin in a Pokemon battle. And when she loses to the player, she refuses to accept that it was a fair fight and gives them an additional challenge on top of it. She seems to have a massive inferiority complex when it comes to Lance, and it's hard not to see why. Her original Pokemon team consisted of 3 unevolved Dragonairs and a Kingdra. I'm just saying, Lance was somehow able to get a Dragonite at level 40. He creates an impossibly large shadow that Clair has to live in, which undoubtedly leads to a lot of resentment and frustration. Especially for someone who tries to train the same type of Pokemon as him, you're undoubtedly gonna start to compare yourselves. So what if we flip that on its head? What if Clair, instead of lashing out with immature temper tantrums, resolved herself, steeled herself to do whatever it took to defeat Lance? Screw hundreds of years of tradition of training dragon-type Pokemon, she will become a Dragon Slayer if that's what it takes for her to come out on top. She is a woman driven by passion and resolve. So my version of Clair is a fairy-type Pokemon trainer decked out in medieval knight armor. As the strongest gym leader of the Johto region, she has declared it her duty to protect its citizens from any pseudo-legendary Pokemon that may go on a rampage. Especially since fairy types are super effective against both Tyrannotars and Dragonites. She's assisted, of course, by her fairy-type team of Pokemon, a Togetic and Togekiss, both of which help to heal and rescue civilians, a Granbull who can help track down both criminals and Pokemon alike, and an Azumarill, which we all know is the huge power muscle of the team. She even has a fairy-type Kingdra who acts as her sort of spirit guide. Instead of being a sort of water dragon seahorse hybrid, this Kingdra still resembles that, but is much more of a guiding pixie or fairy. Think of Navi from The Legend of Zelda. One of Clair's biggest goals was obviously to defeat her cousin Lance, and she can still go toe-to-toe with him at times. But on her quest to strength, she's also found other resolve to be a protector and nurturer for other people. Her breaking the tradition of her family is also a nice bookend since it matches the first gym leader, Falkner, that you encounter in the games. But those are all my redesigns of the Johto Pokemon gym leaders. Be sure to leave a comment telling me which Pokemon or trainer you like the most, and let me know if you want to see more videos like this from the channel. Have a nice damn rest of your day.